delay there. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Saturday morning Fife Property Show. Today, Jim, we're going to look at the rules of letting. I know you're on foot today, but you're going to join in, and we're going to talk through the 5 universal principles that really every landlord should know. And we're calling it the rules of lettings this morning. And I think it is quite important. And I think whatever kind of landlord you are, or wherever you own rental property, there are some universal principles that apply to really keeping your investment, and I'll say it, profitable, sustainable, and enjoyable as well. I'm sure you'll agree with that, Jim. Obviously, I've been not just a landlord but an investor as well for many years.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, private landlords and investors and things, it's effectively a small business. You're a small business owner, and it's just like any high street shop or online retailers. And I mean, an important part of their success is all the planning and the management of their portfolio. So I think, fortunately, being organised and astute is completely free. So you can do that. And today we're going to try and talk you through as best we can about mastering the key fundamentals of buy-to-let. And they include referencing and management. We're going to talk about avoiding penalties and fines, which is easily done, especially with the legislation and the minefield that the lettings legislation creates nowadays. Choosing the right specification, maximising your market, and also managing your finances, which is really important. And a lot of people overlook that, and that's where that's one of the pitfalls that I see a lot of new landlords and investors, obviously, where things start to go wrong. So, and we love to help landlords and investors, as you will hopefully know if you watch regularly, and if not, that is what we are all about. And helping them get things right and run their portfolio with a lot of more ease and as a well-oiled machine, effectively. So let's get down to it today and have a wee talk about what these principles are. And I mentioned there, first and foremost, referencing and management. And for me as a letting agent, I feel this is just paramount, and one of the most important parts is the initial referencing of the property, of the tenant, and then the management of the property. What's your thoughts on the initial referencing and things of tenants before they go into a property, Jim?
It's probably paramount more than anything. I mean, I've tried it in the very beginning where there was never any reference in the very beginning anyway. Nobody really knew how to reference tenants properly. So a tenant needs to be, there needs to be proper reference. There needs to be certain things that are done prior to the tenant moving in, just to make sure you can protect the landlord's interests and also probably protect the tenant's interests as well. I think it's really important to do that. I definitely think it's really important to do that.
And getting that right at the beginning, it makes the whole process a lot easier and streamlines things. It makes it so much more enjoyable for not just the landlord or the agent, but the tenant and everyone involved, if things are done properly at the beginning and everything's put in place.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think when it comes to selecting a tenant as well, you cannot be too careful. And when you choose the way you set things up, it will have a massive impact on how smoothly tenancy runs. So I think, firstly, really be sure that you conduct thorough referencing, including credit checks on tenants, confirming their income, seeing what their bank statements, their last 3 bank statements for the last 3 months. You could request that. And one for me, which is really important, and I think it's if they're someone who's rented previously, is getting a landlord or an agent's reference from their previous rental property. That is a big help when you have somebody coming into a property. Because if you've got a landlord or a tenant or a letting agent that's had a tenant previously, and they give them a glowing reference, then that puts them in good stead. Be careful sometimes if landlords are trying to offload bad tenants.
That's what I was thinking as well. That's a classic when a landlord tries to offload a bad tenant, and then they might just not give the reference that they're meant to be given.
Yeah. I mean, that could happen, obviously, so be careful of that. But if you're speaking to maybe a well-established landlord or a reputable agent that's giving you a good reference, then it's usually a good indicator for how the tenancy and how the person's going to be throughout the tenancy.
Yeah.
Another thing is to be really, really prepared and have a detailed inventory and photos and even a video evidence of your property and how it is at the beginning of the tenancy. And that's everything from the decor, the appliances, the floor coverings, right down to the radiators, the switches, and all the fixtures and fittings. Have all that documented and have that signed in agreement with the tenant at the beginning of the tenancy. We've said it before, inventories and condition reports are not mandatory, but they are so important to safeguard yourself as a tenant, as a landlord. If a tenant's in there, especially when you come to the end and it's dealing with a deposit and things, if you want to make a claim on the deposit, then you really need to provide that evidence, and everybody needs to be in agreement. So that is something that is so important, as the inventory or the condition report, whatever you refer that to. And we as agents have a third party that does that. You can do your own. Landlords and agents and things sometimes do that. I think it's best to have a third party independent contractor or clerk, as they're called, to create that inventory and put it in place. I mean, Jim, did you ever have instances before inventories and things where, I mean, I know you do, it's just obviously the difficulty sometimes with deposits and making a claim without the deposit scheme and inventories and things as well?
In terms of
I'm just, obviously we're talking about referencing and management and the importance of having an inventory and condition report in place at the beginning, a detailed one as well. Obviously, because when you get to the end of that point, I mean, I remember when there wasn't a deposit scheme, and you will as well, Jim, and there wasn't, inventories weren't really a thing, and making claims on deposits and things when you come to the end is quite difficult without that.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, when there was no inventories, there was nothing else. It was just left to the landlord and the tenant to fight out between themselves who thought they were deserved and entitled to get the deposit back. And in all fairness, myself, I mean, I just, we did do condition reports anyway in the beginning. We did sort of video walkthroughs, and I used to just do 1-page inventory reports telling people what they got and what the condition was of the stuff. Because I used to do furnished as well. So I think, it worked okay, but you had to, I think you just had to, there was just a bit of ambiguity between who was getting what. So who was getting what and who was entitled to what.
And how that would be.
And then it caused a problem. And then everybody always thought they were hard done by. The landlord always thought they were hard done by. The tenant always thought they were hard done by. And probably the deposit scheme was the best way forward, because often it was just left to the tenant be feeling aggrieved that they'd been hard done by, but in the majority of cases.
Jim's connection's a wee bit gone there, but yeah, we're talking about inventories, and I remember when trying to deal with deposits and things at the end without the inventory or even the deposit scheme. And as Jim says, it's one of the best things that were implemented to not just safeguard landlords, but the tenant as well, and both sides. So you broke up a bit there, Jim, so I was just moving on with that. So, and also I think as well, to be visiting the property, say at least every 6 months, and see how your tenants are doing, ask about any problems, see if there's any damage that could be picked up on, that could be rectified that's not been reported, and things like potentially like leaks that have maybe started or something that's potential for a leak. Malfunctions or damages or anything like that, choke gutters and things. These are all things that maybe don't get reported but really need to be picked up on. And when it comes to referencing and management and things, a lot of landlords do cut corners, especially on the referencing side, which usually then leads to later problems. And we do a lot of these shows, and for more tips and getting it really right, you could take a look at a rigorous referencing blog, which I've put the link in the blog attached to this post and the video we're doing today, so that you could click through and have a look at that. You could look at that, you could read it, you could listen to the blog or the podcast, and you could read it as well. So let's move on to avoiding penalties and fines. And avoiding penalties and fines is really costly and unnecessary, but it's also remarkably easy. And with all the ever-changing laws and legislation, it is so easy to do that. That said, though, many landlords we've met could have avoided a penalty by getting really just the basics right. So I think to start with, before your tenancy even starts, give your tenant the proper move-in pack, a copy of the tenancy agreement, and also the accompanying easy read notes. Up here in Scotland, I think in England it's the how to rent guide that accompanies the tenancy agreement, but the private residential tenants in Scotland have the easy read notes, which really does outline what the tenant's responsibilities are through the duration of the tenancy. Also, in addition, safety certificates, I mean, the gas, the electricity, and have those dates diarised for renewals. Now, as an agent, we have a system, as soon as we start a tenancy, we have all those dates put in, and it automatically generates the renewal dates and things as well. But if you're self-managing or you're using an agent, make sure they have that kind of system in place to make sure that they could pick up on renewal dates for your safety certificates, especially your gas and your smoke alarms with your electricity and things as well. I mean, installing smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and your gas safety, for me, are up there. But obviously, all the safety certificates are important. Make sure you have smoke alarms on every floor. Make sure you test them the day they move in or the day prior, or even maybe your inventory clerk does that. I know ours does. On the day that the tenancy starts or the day before, and regardless of how often you previously checked them, make sure you do it before the start of a new tenancy. And also on your inspections, whether that's 6 monthly or whatever, make sure it's on the inspection checklist to make sure the smoke alarms and the carbon monoxide detector are in place and they are working. And then it brings me back to obviously talking about the inventories, registering your tenant's deposit with the government approved body like well, Safe Deposit Scotland, and is what we use, but there's 3 in Scotland. I think England's got Tenancy Deposits Services. We've got My Deposit Scotland up here as well. So there's a few to choose from, and make sure that's done within 30 days of receiving the deposit. And I would say send the tenant confirmation of their registration, but the Safe Deposit Scotland, I know, do that automatically. And that is a really good thing as well, because before the tenancy deposit scheme, you would have to hold all your deposits in your client account, and then or the return at that end would be dealt with rather than the third party, which is the deposit scheme. So unless you really love keeping up with the evolving legislation, then you'll do yourself a huge favour by having your property managed. And I think obviously as we move forward with all this legislation and the way that the sector is obviously governed, and obviously the laws around that, then I think having a letting agent's one of your most important things to have. And we also done a blog on this, Jim. It was choosing a letting agent. I've stuck the link to that in this one as well, and that will really help you pick out the best letting agent in your area, and the real questions to ask them, and really pick up on how they operate as an agent and whether they're right for you and they're going to do the proper job. I mean, Jim, I'm sure you'll agree, having the right letting agent and having them educated and know exactly what to do is a really important thing, because there's a lot of agents out there that are not conducting themselves properly. I know in Scotland we have to be registered now, which is great, but you need to make sure that they know their stuff and they'll know the local market and how to really find you the best tenant and look after the property for the duration. You're going to agree because I'm your letting agent.
Yeah, but you know, it's like I thought you were going to ask my question. So you know, your letting agent is probably everything. There's that many to start up, and there's that many that can get qualifications anyway. But I think experience and wisdom and expertise count for everything. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, anybody could pass exams if that's the case, but does the exams actually tell you what you should be doing and how you should be doing it? And that's, you know, and what happens in practicality and in the real world and commercial reality, rather than actually what's happening, you know, on a textbook. We all know, well, I know we're in this mess with the government because they're all textbook academics. That's effectively it. And that's why we're in the mess we're in. And we've probably just got another set of textbook academics in as well. I don't understand commercial reality in business. But we'll see. Time will tell. I'm not holding out hope. But I think that's what it comes down to, anything in business as well. if you don't have a commercial awareness or commercial sense about what's going on, you'll never get further forward than what you're doing right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, it's great that obviously we need to obviously be educated to a certain standard as letting agents and have a letting agent registration. But as you say, anybody could sit down and do that. And I would agree wholeheartedly with you that a lot of the knowledge and experience and things that I've picked up over the years, I think is more, well, I know is more useful to me than whatever I could learn in a textbook or on the letting agent registration course and things as well. They are great, and it's good that everybody has to have that, but you can't obviously put a price on the knowledge and expertise that an agent gains over a period of time. You've got letting agents that come in to let and manage your property that have been doing this for a year or 2 years, then you're going to find you're going to have problems. Try and find somebody who is experienced and been in the industry for a while and knows what they're talking about. And and in that blog that I've attached to this post, you'll be able, there's questions in there that you could really drill down and ask your agent, and your agent should be able to answer them. Do you know, whether it's things about potential investments or the right tenants or areas in the local area, they should have a really good local knowledge as well. So there's a lot in there, and put your agent to the test, especially if you're at that point of changing them, for choosing them. So yeah, click through on that blog, and it goes into that a lot deeper, but it's a very important part of the process. Choosing the right specification was one thing that one of the headings in this, and the most successful rental properties, they do require minimal maintenance. They stay looking current. They appeal to the best tenants. So when you're choosing things like fittings, think of timeless and durable for everything, really. You could look at timber and tiles that are more maybe hardware than carpets. They're less prone to stains and things, and easier to replace when sections get damaged. Just remember, always buy maybe a wee bit more and have some that's left over if you're wanting to be prepared for that kind of eventuality. Also in kitchens and bathrooms and things, buying better quality taps and brushed steel or chrome, do you know, that are obviously going to stay on trend and be quite durable. And then choose natural timber and matte finishes for cupboards and things over, like, do you know, these high gloss delicate fronts and things that could really damage easier and not be as hard wearing. So they're all things to think about. And we've done quite a few renovations recently, Jim, on your portfolio. And these are all the things to think about, is to keep things on trend, but also things that are going to stand the test of time. And it's finding that balance where you're not obviously overspending on refurb and renewing things that's going to need replaced again in a short period of time. Things like using washable paint and that as well. Washable paint on white walls, or maybe even that soft grey that's quite popular now. And that'll work on anybody's style, and it'll make it feel warmer and brighter, and it minimises the need to keep redecorating if you're able to wipe down walls and clean them in between tenancies if you have to. So that's things to think about. And you'll never regret investing in the right specifications at the time. But steering clear of all these fads and cheap products that'll date and fail reliability quite fast. Do you know, we had that one of yours, Jim. I think we were looking at how we were doing bathrooms and things, and the trend was to do all the black fittings and and it looked good, but we were thinking, you know, in time,
just go out of date.
It'll go out of date. Yeah, I mean, it still looks good. It was quite a fairly recent one, but yeah, and that was something we learned, obviously, that we got the contractor to do the full refit, and that's something that we wouldn't usually do. As I say, you're probably better with the brushed steel, chrome, timeless kind of fittings. So you'll save a whole lot of money and time in repairs and replacements if you do that right at the beginning and get the right specifications for your rental property. Any thoughts on the specifications of rental properties and things? I know you've done a lot over the years, Jim, and you used to do a lot of your own in the beginning.
It's just it's just keep it neutral, I think. Just make sure it's at a standard, that it's nice and clean and tidy. If you would move into it yourself, then somebody else would move into it as well. That's really what it comes down to.
Do you know?
I think chrome fittings. I'm still a fan of neutral colours like magnolia and that. I mean, folk call it magnolia. You can just call it wheatgrass if you want. It's entirely up to yourself, but it's nice and warm and inviting anyway. And it does the job. And then it's just a blank canvas for someone else to put their own stamp on it.
Do you think a lot of new investors and people that are coming in and they're all wired and fired and they've got that the right attitude, fair enough, but do you think they get a wee bit too carried away and thinking too elaborate and have all these great ideas, but they're maybe not necessary, and you're maybe just giving yourself extra work and creating something that was a lot more costly, and probably, like I say, not going to stand the test of time than what a neutral, simple approach would have been.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So let's look at maximising your market. And although it's possible to start a property, is that a Lamborghini?
Lamborghini. Private regi plate. Person called Sam. Boy or a girl, actually. Could be a Samantha. Doesn't say what type of Lamborghini it is, though.
Well, that'll be a costly one anyway.
Yep.
So yeah, maximising your market is something we're going to talk about. So although it's possible to start a property revolution, your best bet when choosing which rental property to buy is to go with the flow and pick up one that has a really large audience in your local area, so that it's always in high demand. So, I mean, the basics are obviously to look at the three main tenant groups, I suppose. And for us, one of the main ones is families. Families want a home with a nice lawned garden, easy parking, close to good education, and that could be maybe nursery, primary, secondary school, depending on what your target audience is. Is it a young family? Is it a more established family with teenagers, or a mix of both? I mean, if you've got a lot of properties where we are in Fife have a lot of those amenities surrounding them anyway, so it doesn't matter what stage the family's at. But family units are a really popular one, and if you've got 2 and 3 bedroom houses, or even bigger flats that will accommodate family living, if you get that right in the right place, close to schools and things and transport links, you're onto a winner, and these will always be in high demand. Jim, you've got a lot of your portfolios set up like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you play to your audience. It's a typical example if you take it. And Gordon Ramsay talks about all the time. It's like, why would you be selling steak in a place that's got it just wants burgers? It's like, why is my business suffering? Why am I not getting any customers? It's like, well, I try to sell steak in a hamburger territory. That's what it comes down to. So you understand your market and play to your market, and you know what you should be doing for that reason. But it's advice if you're letting agents probably. I can't be bored learning all the different markets and who does what now. It's like that's what you do well. So I just rely on you to tell me, is that going to be popular? Is somebody going to need that? As often as well when you're buying portfolios, you know exactly what they've been using it for before, and it's worked very well. They're just wanting to exit, so you can just pick up the same property and it's going to work.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what you say, that the local knowledge, an agent has got a lot of good local knowledge of what is in demand, is so useful to you when you're purchasing a new buy to let, because you don't need to think, is this the right purchase? Am I going to be able to fill this? Am I going to find the right tenants? Is it in the right location? Your agent should be able to tell you all that without obviously any hesitation, because they'll know the local market well. And that's like I say, we're going back to agents that have maybe been started for a year or two, or somebody that's moved from another area to one area. They're not going to have that local knowledge. So that's where you put your agent to the test again, like we said. Another group is sharers. We've done a show about sharers, and people like sharers and younger people need good transport links for work destinations, low maintenance outdoor spaces, so they don't need a big garden. They would happily have a small patio or a balcony, and near to places where they could socialise, or sports bars, or even coffee shops and leisure centres and things as well. That's the kind of demographic that they are, and that's what you would need to think about. And in comparison to having schools and things as well. And then you could look at high earning professionals, which will look for the more bright, vibrant local scene, and they expect a wee bit more, luxury apartments and maybe that wee bit more premium fittings. If it's a high earning professional on their own or a couple, they don't have children and they work and they maybe enjoy maybe things at a wee bit different level. And so think about that in the area. And they sometimes like buildings that have got amenities with parking that's included and secure door entry and things like that. So I mean, there's a lot to think about, and there's a whole lot more on that subject that we could go through. Like I say, we've done blogs on that before. You could take a look at the blog that we've got in the link to this post. It's choosing a buy to let, and it's tips on every kind of rental property and every kind of tenant that you could think of, and that really goes into that a lot more in a lot more depth. So yeah, have a wee read of that if you're trying to think about what is your tenant group or your target audience, and that'll help you pick the right property in the right area. We're going to talk about managing finances, which I think is a really important one. Well, I know it is a very important one. I mean, everything's important that we're going through, but managing your finances is really up there. And money worries are an unwelcome and stressful part for plenty of landlords and investors. And there's a lot of landlords and investors that have healthy income streams, Jim, but they've got a bit of a disastrous cash flow because they're not managing their finances properly. Would you agree? Yeah.
Happens all the time. There's a lot of landlords that just leverage themselves up to the hilt.
Mm-hmm.
They never plan for weathering any storms, especially what's happening now. With the current government, you never know what's going to happen. What happens if they take away Section 24 completely? So you've no longer got a tax deduction, tax credit at all.
Yeah.
Against your mortgage interest if it's in your own name. That would be, I tell you what, that to me that would be absolutely stupidity. But they've clearly said that they're going to go for the private sector to raise the extra money to pay for everything. It's like how many businesses and how many companies do you need to wring out in order to get more money to pay for everybody else?
Yeah.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy, but that's their policy. So these are storms that you've got to predict. I mean, I suppose you don't need to expect it to happen, but you need to plan for if it does happen, what you're going to do, how you're going to cope with, how you're going to make sure that you're okay. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think there is a few simple planning measures that you can exercise, and it will really help you avoid that financial squeeze. And I think, firstly, looking at your budget and budget for an empty time, even if it's just an empty 2 weeks of the year, just in case you maybe need to carry out work at a changeover period of a tenancy, maybe for damages or upgrades or just having that time. So budget for that time where you might need to have work done, and think about, and like I say, even if it's just for 2 weeks, you might not necessarily do that in a year, but you've given yourself that opportunity, and your finances will still be okay for you to be able to do stuff for a 2 week period of the year if you need to.
Yeah.
Building.
Yeah, I would again. It's all down to put your numbers into your spreadsheet, work out how much. Where's your break-even point? So break-even point is between what your rent is and how much your mortgage is, and so in other words, is your mortgage 50% of your rent? That means your break-even point will be 6 months. So if you're empty more than 6 months, I know it's a huge tolerance, but if you're empty more than 6 months, then that's when you need to worry, because you can't cover your overheads, but at least you can cover the mortgage if it's in 6 months and above. And that's what I mean about managing your risk and making sure you can weather storms. Because if you're empty because you've got to get a refit, or maybe the upstairs is refusing to do something, we've had it, they're refusing to fix something which is causing you a problem, which means you can't tenant the property, then these are things you've got to weather a storm for. If the government changes their mind about tax credits, if they change their mind about finance acts or anything like that, then at least you can plan for it, because you've got a huge degree of tolerance in there in the first place. I think that's all the things you've got to be concerned about, definitely.
I think, I mean, as you said, it's quite rare that you're going to have a property empty for 6 months of the year. But if you've looked at the risk involved and stress test your investment to be able to survive that, then
Yeah.
it gives you a lot more confidence in what you've got. Obviously what you're up against, and if you come up against that, you know that you're going to be okay and you'll come out the other side. Whereas a lot of people don't plan like that, and that's when they end up. It pushes a lot of landlords against the wall, and they're out, and it's the end of their business. And we've seen it happen recently with a few, and I'm sure a lot of other agents in that have. So yeah, definitely look at the risk involved and stress test your investment. The good thing to think about as well is building a rainy day pot for repairs and essential maintenance and things. And even if that's down to, I know, Jim, your model is a lot of you don't take anything out and you keep it there, and it's for reinvestment and for upgrades and things as well. A lot of people maybe don't operate in that way, but even if you're putting, say, £100 a month, that gives you a pot at the end of the year of £1,200. And whether you use that or not, but then if it's still there and you could build on it, and then when you've got, I mean, it could even build up a wee bit of interest possibly. But
this is when I worry when people say, I just want to cover the mortgage.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, really? Because if anything happens, you're screwed. You've not got any money at all, and then you're going to have to put it in your own pocket. I don't know. Everybody keeps going about cost of living crisis around the fact that they have no money. So I would only assume that most landlords don't have the money to put it out of their own pocket.
Yeah.
So therefore, you need to sort of work out that you can put money aside all the time. You need to be more vigilant. I mean, I had somebody, saying, "Oh, here's a guy that claims to be a social landlord or some social morals or some, and he's talking to everybody on about making sure they can maximise the rent." Well, I choose not to maximise the rent most of the times. And that's fine for me, but I do teach everybody else. You need to maximise the rent if you're close to the wire in terms of covering your costs and your break-even point as well. You have to maximise the rent. It's your duty and it's your responsibility, because then what do? You're going to get 6 months, a year into the tenancy, 2 years into the tenancy. Next minute it hits the fan, and then you've got to turn to the tenant and say, "Sorry, I know you're really comfortable here and you're settled here, but you've got to move because I have to sell it now because I can't afford to keep it." So you've got a duty and responsibility to make sure you run this financially correctly. And this is again going back to the rhetoric. A lot of tenant bodies and that say houses are not a commodity. You're absolutely right. They're not a commodity. They're an investment for the long term, so people can actually have a roof over their heads. For the government that's failed in their housing responsibility to do that, and that's why we've had to step in and do it. And we've seen an opportunity there. Chosen to use our capital for a moral purpose and a higher purpose than actually just leaving it to the investment houses to invest in, mining and exploration and smoking industry, alcohol industry, and pharmaceutical companies, all which take advantage of people's problems and addictions.
Yeah.
So, I'll stand on a stage with anybody and talk about morality if they want to do that, because I'll show them for who they truly are if that's the case. But I do tell everybody, maximise the rent as much as possible if you have to, because you have to make sure you can run the tenancy properly.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim. And to not have that money or pot aside there to fund it, expected maintenance and jobs, or even those surprise jobs as well. Your boiler might break. There's anything that could crop up, and you need to be in a position to be able to put that right without having to. I've seen it in the past, and people. I mean, not to say that's a bad, but it's putting things using a credit card and things, but with no intention to maybe. I mean, people might use a credit card as part of their business, but pay it off at the end of the month. But then there's a lot of people that are maybe using the credit card, and it's not getting used like that. So, have that pot there and build that pot, because it will be so useful to you if you're up against something that is going to be a costly repair or expense. And that's where that comes in. And like Jim says, it's to keep the portfolio, or even if it's an individual rental property, running and functioning for both you as an investment and the tenant as their home. And it's so important to keep an eye on. We were talking about tax as well earlier, Jim, and it is so important. And putting money away each month for tax, maybe in a safe place where you can't touch it, like maybe a no access savings account or bonds or whatever, or even straight to HMRC, you may even get a rebate from that as well. So I mean, tax is so important, and tax planning and things as well as a landlord or an investor. And I know tax can be quite difficult to navigate for a lot of people, but it's such an important thing, and you need to remember and keep it in the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about managing your finances for your buy-to-let.
I think taxation is probably one of the up there with everything.
Yeah.
Before you even start the journey, you need to work out what your tax position is.
Yeah.
And how you should, what ownership structure you should have. Should be a limited company? Should you own it in your own right? Does it work out? How can you make it most tax efficient so you can invest more money into the company and leave more money in the company? These are all different things you've got to decide before you actually start the journey. In the beginning, there was no sort of plan or anything when I first started about 30 years ago. So it was just a case that we were getting huge tax advantages as sole traders, as sole owners. So we used that in the beginning, but then I then got to the point where Elaine was moving into a higher tax bracket, and therefore we decided to start a limited company just to mitigate that tax position for that reason. And that's why the limited company came about. Thank God actually that happened, because then everything after that started to get bought in the limited company from then on. And well, we know what happened with Section 24, and at least we had quite a lot of stock and portfolio protected from Section 24.
Yeah, your tax planning and things is so important, and minimising your tax is landlord or investment 101. I would say you really need to know what you're doing, and a good way to check that you're claiming all your allowable expenses and things. Again, we've done a show on that, Jim. It was called Landlord Tax Tips, and I've put the link to that in this post again, so you click through and have a look at that. And it really delves a lot deeper into tax planning and tips for you as a landlord or an investor on how to do that right, or speak to the right people about how to do that right. I think that's important as well, Jim, is that people kind of just try and muddle through and don't do things properly, and don't have maybe a proper tax advisor or a financial advisor in place, or an accountant who's advising them on what they should be doing, properly doing, to make sure that they're navigating through that correctly.
I mean, when you think about the logic, I'm sitting in London just now, and you see all the real estate round about me here, and a lot of them are over $500,000. And see if you've got an overseas company, limited company, and it's over $500,000 the value of the property, you have a taxable, almost like an ADS, which is payable and assessed every 3 years on your property, and you'll pay a tax on that every year if it's more than $500,000 for the next 3 or 4 years, and then the value again. And if it's more than $500,000 again for the next 3 or 4 years, again, you keep continuing to pay that tax because you're overseas landlord. So, everybody castigates overseas landlords and stuff like that. But in London especially, but they're still getting taxed as a result of it. They're getting taxed every single year, whether they like it or not. And it's an additional dwelling tax, like ADS is. Whether they like it or not, because of that. So I bet you most people never even knew that law existed, and you wouldn't, because most landlords will probably have low value properties. But when it comes to London, it's a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, because
it's get the right tax and the right advice from the right people, when you start off that journey.
Yeah, and I think the general consensus between people is they think that overseas landlords are trying to dodge tax, or and that's not always the case.
Well, they can. We know that.
Well, yeah, we know that. But I mean, that's just an exact, like I said, that's a good example.
It's like the Microsoft owner boat appeared in Fife, off the shore of Fife, yesterday or the day before, and everybody's going about it was 135 million for the boat, and I says that's a tax avoidance scheme right in front of you. And I don't think anybody understood what I was meaning. A couple of laughing faces on the comments and the emojis and stuff like that, but effectively that's what it is.
That's what they do.
That's what they're doing. It's they're buying the big huge massive yacht, because it actually saves them a fortune in tax. It's not just buying the yacht; it's how they use as the domicile as well. We're having that yacht, and where's that yacht's positioned mainly, and where they live.
It's all to do with where that yacht is, what dock it's registered in which country.
And it's a nice way of doing it. If you're due a huge tax bill and at the end of the year because you're in a certain country, then you could just buy a yacht, which is probably just a fraction of that price, or maybe even that price in its entirety. But every single year now, you're domiciled somewhere else for that very reason. So it's a ploy. These big yachts are bought for taxable reasons, for what they call tax planning. So that's another thing that you have to be aware of. The government's fully aware of this, by the way, and they don't do anything about it because they don't want to damage an industry, which is potentially millions and millions of pounds for investors and for the people that will actually vote for them and the people that fund them. Let's be honest. Even the Labour Party, the SNP, everybody like that. They're all different people. Look at John Caldwell come out and back the Labour Party, billionaire, founder of Phones for You originally. So what does that say? There's bound to be. He's not backing them for any reason other than there's got to be something in it for them, whether it's charitable purposes or whether it's austerity purposes. I don't know. So you've got to think about why would he back them then if that's the case? Because he's the billionaire. They're supposed to be going to tax all these billionaires, but that's him effectively.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly, because on TikTok, Raza, you're saying, can you explain again where I could find the link for the landlord tax tips, please? Because I'm running live on TikTok, but if you go onto, we're on our other platforms, and I've attached the blog that we're going through today, and it's got the links in there. And you go through the YouTube page for the Wealth Creation Show, you'll find the link attached onto this this show that we're doing today, and all the other links as well that I went through today, Raza. So hopefully that's helpful to you. But yeah, tax is so important, Jim, and a lot of good points you made there. It's such an important part of your buy-to-let business. So I'm going to round up and really ask the question to people: is your buy-to-let on the right track? And that's really the question. And I tried to obviously go through these principles today. There's nothing we love more than helping and boosting people's the performance and the profitability of their rental properties and their rental homes. And especially the ones that we manage and the investors that we look after. I could do the same for anybody if they come to me. So feel free to do that. In this blog, I've also put my direct mobile number and my email address. Anyone watching, feel free to come to me and have a chat anytime. No strings attached, just a friendly chat. I'm happy to help with any questions or about anything we've covered today or anything else that we spoke about in previous shows. So feel free to do that, anyone. And thanks for joining us for London today, Jim. On the go.
You're welcome.
It's always good to get your input, obviously, on lettings and investment strategies and things as well. So I will leave it there this morning, and I'll let you go, Jim. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and you'll catch us on the rerun later on as well. Okay. All right, Jim. I'll leave it, and I'll see everybody later.